Hi again, everybody. Good morning and welcome back for the 6th Annual Energy Storage Summit. So for our next session of the morning, we have a case study, which I think follows on quite nicely from our opening discussion. This case study will be presented by Caroline Wright, Senior Business Development Manager at Wärtsilä, and Christophe Banos, the Portfolio Development Manager at Pivot Power. So their session will be around energy assets, meeting energy markets, and combining technologies and stacking revenues to showcase various revenue streams and capabilities. So I will hand over to the panelists the presenters to introduce themselves, and then we'll be moving on to some Q&A at the end of the slides. So if anyone does have any questions, then please make sure to pop them in the chat or the portal and we'll get them answered. Thank you. And over to you, Caroline and Christophe.
Hi, thanks very much, Lucy. Yeah, Caroline Wright, Senior Business Development Manager at Wärtsilä. Been Wärtsilä for just over a year now, and been in battery storage for maybe about up to 6 years now. So nice to meet you all.
Hi, good morning. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much. Christophe Banos from EDF Pivot Power, the development manager. My role essentially consists of looking at financial close, internal governance to get them to break ground essentially. Thank you. Next slide. Sorry. Caroline and I will essentially cover. I will talk through the first 2 bullet points here, which is the introduction to Pivot Power, which is a unique business model, moving on and hence to the business model. And we thought with Caroline to flip it a little bit on its head and allow Wärtsilä to speak about the projects that we are working together on a collaborative manner. And Caroline will touch upon Wärtsilä and the GEMS system that Wärtsilä is developing. Thank you. Next slide, please. So Pivot Power in terms of the portfolio itself, in terms of the assets, it consists of 40 connections to the national grid. So 40 grid connection agreements to the UK national grid at 57 megawatts of capacity each. That allows us to essentially develop on those grid connection points 50 megawatt grid scale storage, and the additional capacity grid connection is to develop a private wire offering to customers to develop rapid chargers for example throughout the UK or to bus operators. So this is essentially the crux of the Pivot Power asset and the portfolio. But Pivot Power is also about people. Pivot Power is a startup that was created in 2018 with about 15 people, and EDF Renewables, the organization was originated in November 2019. So Pivot Power now is fully embedded. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Pivot Power in the value chain. If you look at the horizontal on the top, this is what is common today and across all countries essentially. It's commonly known as, depending on the organization, vertically integrated solutions. So from power generation all the way to end consumers. Clearly, it's broken down in the UK with DNOs and National Grid, either at the transmission operator in England and Wales, or the system operator managing the transmission grid with the substation. And there are challenges around that value chain. It works, but there are clearly some challenges. Moving on to the bottom horizontal, what we are looking essentially with Pivot Power is to provide an alternative offering by being transmission connected, and essentially in a way bypassing the DNOs, the distribution grid, to connect our large-scale battery storage to then be able to offer services to the national grid. I will touch upon the business model in a minute, but it's been talked at length, essentially the revenue stacking battery storage, and we are essentially doing the same. And then we also allow with PowerWire to have a more resilient business case to provide high volume power connections to EV charging, essentially megawatts for clients to electrify at scale. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the business model, where the Pivot Power at the center with the grid connection agreements, develops and delivers 50 megawatt battery storage with lithium-ion, not similar to most of our competitors, 1 hour duration, and we have 2 projects ready to be operational in the next few weeks. So if you look at the orangey colors, this is the revenue stacking that we see in the UK. Not different, and as I said earlier, covered at length in this conference, I'm sure. So when we look at wholesale energy trading, is they are heading intraday balancing mechanism. There's still an element of capacity market and ancillary service. Clearly, dynamic containment is an exciting opportunity for us to work and stack the dynamic containment with the balancing mechanism. So we are working with optimizers to optimize those battery assets. And then looking on the right, this is where we have our private wire offering to EV charging, fleet charging, and CNI. Please. Well, I think we can move on. Thank you. Thank you. So again, looking at the center node here at the national grid substation, we have our battery containers or modular system, again 50 megawatt, and we go and stack revenues and monetize those. We think there's high value for system flexibility, certainly in the UK and across the world. And then we have that mesh network where we have that flexible and adaptable ecosystem to provide several offering. With an example of this, a live example is the Oxford Energy Super Hub, which has been developed by several partners. And we are working on with Wärtsilä on this project alongside another project, another 50 megawatt in Kent. And this is where I will hand over now to Caroline, the very talented Caroline. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Christophe. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Thanks. Yes, so I thought we'd be bringing a case study to explain a little bit more about what Wärtsilä are doing with their Pivot and EDF. So I'll take you through sort of the project and sort of what the way we approached it and what we're doing. I think Christophe mentioned, obviously, these projects are now fully and well into construction. Even with COVID, the timelines have been going well. In terms of the 2 projects, you can see on the left, we've got the Cowley site in Oxford, which is the Oxford Super Hub. And then on the right, we've got Kemsley in Kent, and so 2 graphics there to show it. You quite clearly see that the Oxford site is quite unusual. It's stacked, allowing access to the containers. The products that we've deployed for this project is our GridSolve Max. It's an air-cooled containerized system, as you can see there. And just to bring it to life in terms of configuration, there's actually 15 GridSolves, 3.5 megawatt hours each, and 18 inverters. And in terms of the overall scope, what Wärtsilä have delivered for this project is the hardware, as you can see, right through to the life cycle services, so the LTSA, in which we'll be managing the assets on the maintenance and LTSA side moving forwards. And I think in terms of the hardware and the delivery side, what sits in between that is effectively our digital platform. So when we're talking about energy assets meeting energy markets, I think the way we say it is that it's end to end. So the hardware can obviously deliver the technical configuration in terms of cycling requirements, degradation curves, etc. But managing the assets to meet the market needs, you really need sort of quite a sophisticated platform that can manage the assets in terms of sort of real-time response, troubleshooting in terms of monitoring, and actually meeting the market needs. There's been lots of talk about sort of the new revenue stacks and revenue streams coming in. And I think that's where our digital platform, which I'll go into in a minute, called GEMS, sort of sits squarely in the middle. And then in terms of sort of meeting the business model, as Christophe sort of quite really well explained, the software and our approach is actually meeting. You've got the technical side, and then it's also meeting the business model needs. So in terms of the Oxford Super Hub, for example, that model is really taking on the challenge of rapid charging and the impact on the grid, so the infrastructure side, with it being transmission connected as well. There's lots of sort of moving parts that need to be considered. And then I think the other thing that sort of I suppose glues it together is this project is here now, the market's evolving. So how do you future-proof the assets moving forward? How do you configure or adapt to the changing revenue streams and revenue stacks we've seen quite readily already through the conference, the new sort of like dynamic containment and revenue streams that are coming in. So how do you actually future-proof that and address that to capture those revenue streams quickly as well? And also the other challenges in terms of what the pivot model is addressing is the 2030 government date when the ban on petrol and diesel. So that's putting a big impact on grid and infrastructure. And I think in terms of pivots and EDF's approach to this is quite innovative in that respect. So in terms of Wärtsilä's brief, we had lots of all of those components, and it's how we packaged them together. I think probably move to the next slide, and maybe I'll go into a bit of a deeper dive on GEMS. I'm quite happy to take questions on the projects, Christophe and I, further into the session. But I suppose to look at a bit more in detail what I mean by the digital platform. So GEMS is our proprietary software. We have a team in the US that has developed it over 10 years. It's basically AI algorithmic based, rules based software. So it intelligently builds hundreds of thousands of data to analyze, monitor, and respond to control commands through the control platform. So the control platform, as you can see there, is GEMS. We've sort of productize it, or it has different functions. We have analyzer. We can simulate sort of scenarios in terms of performance. We have a site controller, and we have what we call Fleet Director. So Fleet Director can manage multiple assets under one platform. So as sort of customers or investors or developers are growing their portfolios, how do you actually manage all of these assets at one time and get one single view? So in terms of Fleet Director, we can connect and control at that level. The levels of control that the software can give is very transparent. The site controller can go in and change the parameters, look at sort of the state of health of the assets. And just to make it clear, in terms of the application, the software can be applied to renewables, so wind and solar, thermal and storage. And we've deployed projects globally that the software manages all of those assets under the one platform. But going back to the sort of the application and how GEMS can get down to the sort of the granular level, we can look at monitoring, we can look at cell level, we can troubleshoot and do remote monitoring and rectify issues before they happen, right up to sort of managing the assets to respond to the markets. So I think a big thing that a lot of is really sort of at the driving seat, I suppose, with any asset owner is the revenue capture. So, you know, with these new revenue streams coming in, it's response time. So can you go in and change the parameters in the software to respond to these changing response times that, for example, dynamic containment, or if you're in the Irish markets, DS3, which is obviously a faster response time, or can you slow them down so you're actually meeting the grid's needs? And I think that the platform gives the control to do that and have that flexibility and transparency to be able to go in and control that. Yeah, I think we'll probably go to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, and then I think, you know, in terms of the I've sort of mentioned hardware, software, business models, I think Wärtsilä's sort of view is that package. It's we have flexible solutions, so obviously storage, and people that know the business, obviously the engine thermal power plants, and they're geared to obviously meet the market needs. So there's more and more flexibility required in the grid, and again, this conference is addressing that at length. And I think the more flexible capacity in the market, the more it enables the growth of renewables, because that flexibility can allow the grid to bring more renewables online and look towards getting a net zero target or a more carbon neutral grid. So in terms of the energy assets, we've got that on one side, and then we've got the energy markets. As Christophe mentioned, you know, Pivot are obviously need to generate returns and capture those valuable revenue streams in the market. And then I think what sits in between is where the software can actually facilitate that. So, you know, in terms of models or applications, we can deploy the whole package, so right through to renewables and hybrids. So, you know, managing curtailment, load shifting. We can sort of address the needs of virtual power plants. So, you know, in terms of fleet director, managing multiple assets under one umbrella, and then right through some of the other projects that we've done globally in terms of microgrids and islands, where in fact we're actually controlling everything right through to the balancing and dispatch, and increasing the renewables use on some of these island projects. So actually, with the GEMS software managing the dispatch, so that the wind, for example, does not have to be curtailed much. So obviously increasing the renewables use on the islands. So that's the sort of the model, that the way we look at it, and this helps us sort of try to address customer needs as well. Could we go to the next slide? Thank you. Yeah, and then I think in terms of sort of addressing the market, I think the clear thing for any investor is to return investment, you know, maximising the IRRs, and with this type of advanced algorithmic software, you like I alluded to before, you know, you can capture these revenue streams. So responding in time or slowing them down, like I said, and maximising the returns through that. And I think also in terms of returns, you're looking at operational performance. So maximising that if your model is to capture early revenue streams and have a shorter life of the battery, or elongating the revenue, the asset out over, you know, 10 years or multiple years plus. So I think that's where the flexibility and that drive to get the returns comes into play. And then in terms of the deployment, you know, with this type of digital platform, there's a speed to market. I think early revenue capture is quite key in these projects. It's in terms of positive cash flow and all that financial stuff. But you know, you can get project development within weeks, site commissioning in days. You know, we can run the testing, and then with the software, we can give regular software updates. So to keep troubleshoot, make sure there's no downtime, etc. And I think this all goes in line with sort of the longer terms of service in the lifecycle services or the LTSA, in terms of managing the requirements under an LTSA, so sort of flexible warranty, etc. And then I think also it's future proofing. I've mentioned it before. It's future proofing these assets to change and adapt in the markets. It can also give the flexibility. Many of these battery storage projects require augmentation. It can also sit with repurposing existing assets if it's a part of another portfolio. And there's no effectively equipment lock-in. And then in terms of the platform, the platform has been developed over 10 years. There's a lot of sort of human learning in there, and I think we sort of all talk about digital, but actually the information that goes into these platforms is from knowledge, and I think knowledge will always be the key driver in any of these projects. So we sort of apply that, and then a customer can use the platform in whatever way they want. It's not a closed box. So you know, I think knowledge is key in terms of sort of maximising these projects, and then also to that. We take cyber security very seriously. We recently, as of last year, we got IEC 62443 certification in terms of cyber security, which sort of brings together the whole sort of security side online, as well as sort of, other aspects that these customers need. So yeah, I think that sort of rounds up I think the benefits that a digital platform can bring. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, and Christophe, please jump in on this one as well. But we thought, just to sort of sum up on that, you know, Pivot are developing and delivering nationwide grid-scale super hubs. We can see that from the examples that Christophe did. You know, I think the new identity of combining Pivot and EDF, the renewables brand, is very strong. I'll let Christophe describe that in more detail. The pipeline is obviously considerable, 100 megawatts of battery storage at Oxford and Kent. And then this future proofing, I think that's something that we see as being very important. I think the other importance in the market now is, you know, the revenue streams are evolving, but also I think the business models are evolving as well. I think there's new initiatives in terms of national grid, and I think developers and investors are also looking at you know, forward into the future in terms of what these innovative models are looking like. And then it's all going towards a net zero grid, net zero targets, reducing the carbon in the UK and Ireland. Christophe, I don't know whether you've got any more points. If not, we can jump to some questions.
Thank you. Yeah, just wrapping up really, as you say, thank you very much. Yes, exactly as you said, the real demonstration and the doing, if you like, is that we are essentially going to have in the next few weeks 100 megawatt of battery storage, so 2 times 50 at Oxford and Kent, as Caroline described, and we have more in the pipeline. And this is at the back of Pivot Power having been acquired by EDF Renewables to spearhead that development. So having the backing of EDF and really looking at developing those sites further. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline and Christophe, for the presentation. We're just going to open it up to some questions now. So just to start off with, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to stick it in the chat box. And the first one we've got in is GEMS trading in the market on its own, like other algo traders that presented yesterday? And is EDF not integrating these assets in their VPP?
Yeah, I'll probably put that
so
last.
I probably can take the first one.
Yeah,
go on.
that'd be great.
Yes, Apologies if my connection is a little bit robotic. So for our two first project, and it's public domain, we are essentially using optimizers. So for Oxford, we are working with a partner via the Energy Super Hub, and our partner is Habitat Energy. And for Kent, we are working with EDF, our colleagues from EDF PowerShift, but it's at arm's length. So there's no, it doesn't mean that EDF is always working with EDF. We are, yeah, we are all working together essentially. Thank you.
With the projects and with looking to have flexible and adaptable ecosystems, how much have you found that grid constraints have been a challenge so far?
So I guess that's for me. When we our colleagues from People Power that started the business and scouting for sites, they started with the research with National Grid with over 300 sites to filter down to 40 of them close to big towns and cities. At the back of doing some high-level analysis that indeed the grid constraint at the distribution level was in some instances a challenge. And things can change. Undoubtedly, things can change, but this was our filtering exercise to look at the 40 sites that we have. So grid constraint was looked at high level, and we believe that now we can deploy those sites and provide those megawatt capacities to customers.
Okay. Caroline, I wonder if you could touch on, we've had the same question back in about whether GEMS is trading in the market on its own.
Yeah, no, sure. No, good question. And no, not to date. In terms of sort of like the majority of the applications in the UK right now, we're doing the energy management side of it. But yeah, and so we can connect to any route to market or platforms and do up to that level. But in terms of GEMS trading in the market in its own right now, no, we're not.
In terms of future-proofing GEMS, Caroline, I was just kind of wondering, how much is it a challenge to have a platform that is so holistic, that looks at so many different elements? Do you find that things don't always necessarily progress in tandem, and whether or not that causes a challenge in terms of updating the software to make sure that it's always ready for the next big thing?
Yeah, no, good question. Thanks, Molly. Yeah, I think we probably get asked this quite often. I think it's down to the platform and the design of the platform, being able to manage multiple assets at one time. It's not designed just for battery storage. I think in terms of the platform is designed for a global reach. So you've got different applications in different markets globally. So I think for that reason it's in the system architecture. I hope that sort of helps answer your question. Yeah.
And with the architecture and with more of the physical side, I was just wondering a little bit about why you chose to stack the battery units at the Oxford Superhub project.
I think I'd probably put that back to Pivot EDF.
Essentially, it was a land availability constraint. Most of our sites are on National Grid land. And when we looked at the detailed engineering design, to take a step back, the beauty and the innovation around the Energy Super Hub as well, which we didn't touch on this presentation today, is that there's a 2 megawatt flow battery included. Now it doesn't mean that was stacked up later. That was always part of the design, the detailed design to allow for spacing and maintenance and traffic. The best solution was to double stack, and that was considering of the design. So as well to double stack, and I've seen picture. I haven't been on site, but I've seen all the structure around the structural engineering side of things is incredible.
Yeah, again, anyone in the audience who has any questions, please just feel free to drop us a message. But I suppose I was also just wondering on the VPPs and on sort of the huge possibility for using them within flexibility. How do you see that side of the market progressing over the next 5-10 years, and how do you see Wärtsilä and Pivot Power playing a role in that? Caroline, I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think in terms of sort of the market there, I think from Wärtsilä's point of view, we've got, I suppose, the technical and the software capability to I suppose you might say go with the flow or adapt to those models. So as much as the software is productized, I think we have flexibility in terms of the development to look at some unique development on that potentially. But in terms of VPP, effectively that's a fleet of assets. So I think you would need to understand what those assets are. If they're all smaller assets, then in terms of the revenue streams and the operational side of it, to consider that. But I suppose in general terms, we would see that as a fleet, and that the management of the physical assets and the software being integral in the middle, and then also understanding what the VPP's business model is and what sort of markets they're addressing, so that on the technical side, I keep mentioning about response time and things like that, but that we can actually meet those market needs. So it would depend on the model and things like that. But we've deployed quite sort of, I would say, Pivot being an example, innovative models. So I think it's sort of understanding that to begin with, so we can deliver on it.
Yes, and to add to that, on EDF, at EDF Renewables in the UK, we clearly have onshore assets. We are moving into large-scale solar projects, and we have offshore wind. So we are starting to, I'm not so close to that element of the business, but we are starting to look at digital twins. And EDF is a large organization in France and across the United States. And we have projects there. You can call them pilot projects, but they are not small. But we have projects there, especially in France, where we have a VPP platform that incorporates a hydro plant, a solar plant, a wind plant. And we are really learning by doing, essentially. So we are really taking step by step. And I agree with Caroline, it's a fleet. It's a fleet solution, and we are looking at the best assets to put into the fleet.
With assets, and I know you touched on advancing kind of revenue streams and revenue models, Caroline. I was just wondering how the GEMS platform works with older assets, because we've seen things like dynamic containment and stuff come in with these very, very high levels of demands from assets, and what the sort of challenges are with having this very high-tech level of software operating with an older asset, and how you can manage that to ensure you can maximize the revenue stream.
Yeah, sure. So I think, I suppose if you say older asset, that would be sort of earlier stage battery projects. I think it sort of depends on the asset and the configuration and the duration as well. So, but if you to take projects that are probably a year old, and again it's all down to the configuration. Like I said, to meet any revenue stream, it's GEMS can sort of effectively move up and down the scale in terms of sort of frequency. So you've got FFR, dynamic FFR, you've now got dynamic containment and all the DR and the DM that's coming in, and effectively that's sort of just moving up and down the curve. It's frequency, and I think it's the ability of the software can actually manage that. So whether it's further up or faster response time, you can control that with the software. So I suppose in a way, if it's an older asset, depending on the performance, then the software can address that as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Christophe, with the Oxford Super Hub project, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little more about what the next steps are and whether or not you can see it being replicated in other places around the UK.
Yeah, sure. So next step is really to bring it to operations and really start to generate megawatt and absorb megawatt, and so that should come sometimes around we believe around April. There will be certainly press announcements around that when it becomes operational. You could say we have suffered in inverted comma through the effect of COVID, but nothing drastic at all. It was probably a couple of months delay on that. So that's essentially the next step, really getting everyone ready for operation and working, for example, with the optimizer, habitat, and making sure we have the battery, start to trade on the market and capture DC and looking at stacking, etc., etc. And then the next step is following from that is the clear demonstration that we have an asset and we have the private wire capability ready. And we are getting the right permits to lay that private cable. And we are in the final stages with high value customers to connect. So that will be the first. It's essentially for Pivot Power is the poster child. So we just he or she of that project will be on the posters for us. So and that links to the following question you've asked about replicability. We definitely see this. We are working with other cities, other councils. Further announcement will be made slowly but surely. Yes, very, very exciting times ahead for replicating the model.
Are the new services still covered by warranties that have been provided by the cell suppliers in the past? It is a different usage pattern now than they might, and will those violate those warranties is a question that we've had in. I'm not sure who's best to take this. Caroline, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll certainly give it a go. Yeah, I think in terms of sort of warranties, I think it sort of boils down to sort of offering flexible warranties to allow parameters to be met without sort of stepping outside the warranties from the manufacturers, for example. So I think that might sort of hopefully answer that question. But yeah, I think flexible warranties is probably the answer to that. Hopefully, happy to look at that further.
Cool.
Yeah, nothing to add for me. That's great.
Okay. I think that pretty much covers all the questions. Thank you guys both for taking part and for the really interesting presentation. I'm going to pass back over to Lucy. Yeah, and thank you.
Great, thank you. Just like to echo Molly's sentiment. Yeah, I think it was a really informative and concise presentation, and some great questions as well. I just have seen something else. Oh no, it's an observation. I think you might have covered that already. But yeah, I just want to encourage anyone who does want to speak to Caroline or Christophe further about what they've covered today or any of their other work. Then I believe Wärtsilä have a virtual stand, so you can visit them there and get more information, or you can simply connect with them on the portal. And what we do have coming up next actually is the networking session of the day. So that will allow you 40 minutes where you're able to connect and network with different delegates in the room. So just simply click on the button in your agenda and you'll be thrown into a room with 4 other participants where you'll be able to speak and have your mics on and share details as well. So I hope everybody enjoys that, and we'll reconvene just after that at around 12 p.m. for the rest of the presentations and workshops. So thank you everybody for your questions, and thanks Caroline, Molly and Christophe for today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.